Welcome to the official Warrior podcast from Max. I'm Lisa Ling, a journalist and Warrior superfan.
And I'm Hoon Lee. You may know me as the actor who plays everybody's friend, Wang Chao, and I'm also a writer on the series.
Yes, and as your host, we will be breaking down every episode of Warrior Season 3, and we'll learn more about how this incredible new season came together through interviews with the creators, cast, and crew. We'll also be discussing the very real historical events and people that inspired the characters and story of Warrior, including Bruce Lee, whose writings inspired the entire series.
Today, we're diving into episode 5, entitled Whiskey and Sticky and All the Rest Can Wait, written by Lillian Yu. And we'll be joined today by Parry Young and Jason Tobin, who play Father Jun and Young Jun. We're also going to get some background history on San Francisco's Chinatown and the Tongs with Professor of History and Asian American Studies, Yong Chen.
Yeah, Hoon, I am so excited to talk to Parry and Jason, my favorite father-son duo. And now that we're 5 episodes into the season, I have to say I did not expect to see Father Jun and Young Jun reunited. They seem to be dealing with a very different circumstance, and I wonder if this is going to portend a different kind of relationship between them.
I mean, after all they've gone through the beginning of this season, one hopes they have a slightly different take on their own relationship. And I think that that's going to be the interesting thing to see between these two characters. You know, the show's called Warrior, but you could really call it family. We have Father Jun and Young Jun. We have Assam and Ling as siblings and rival Tongs. We have Young Jun and Assam, blood brothers, representing the idea of found family or discovered family. And there's also characters like Atoy and Lai, where Atoy is a maternal figure for Lai. So the levels of family go very, very deep in this story.
That's right. And like your character, Wang Chao, says earlier in the season, family is complicated.
I was so hoping you would bring that up. It's so
the
true.
Profundity
it's really
of it.
true. It's true. He's, as objectively the wisest cast member in the group. I think it's important to listen to Chao. This is the part where I remind everyone we are about to give away spoilers for episode 5. Actually, I guess we already told you that Father Jun is back. So this is going great. But anyway, just go watch if you haven't. We'll be here when you're ready. Here's our recap of episode 5. Both Ling and Young Jun are detained, and realizing he's about to be deported, Young Jun attempts to persuade the prison guards that he was born in San Francisco.
No Chinese! American! Born in San Francisco.
You hear that? This one says he's not a chink.
American. Born in San Francisco.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You're a regular Abraham Lincoln. Get the fuck back in line.
In prison, Young Jun meets a seemingly friendly teen who recognizes that he's the head of the Hop Way. The teen leads Young Jun to his group, and it's revealed that all of them hold grudges on the Tong. A beating commences. Buckley visits Ling in prison and arranges for her release after Leong hands over the incriminating photos she was using as blackmail. Back at the deportation camp, Young Jun is surprised to find Father Jun taking care of him after the fight.
Still picking fights you can't win, I see.
Father. What are you doing here?
Looks like we both fucked up pretty good, huh?
Meanwhile, Assam meets with Ling and asks her if she can help them break Young Jun out of the camp. She says she will, only if the Hopway cut the Longzi into their counterfeiting business.
Besides saving your boss's life, the Longzi will provide a space to continue printing, free from police interference. Like you said, I have the connections. You and I can finally be on the same side. We can all get rich together. Or Young Jun can take his chances in China.
At Atoy's brothel, Nellie brings food and clothing for the girls and informs Atoy that she lost to Strickland in court. Atoy rejects Nellie's proposal to buy another ranch in Sonoma together. Yong Chen is saved from deportation at the last minute, and he negotiates Father Jun's release as well. At a toy's brothel, the Hopways celebrate Yong Jun's release and Father Jun's return. In an intimate setting, Mai Ling and Leong discuss the new deal with the Hopway. Mai Ling acknowledges that she should have consulted him about expanding their business and proposes marriage. Is this a political maneuver to keep him as an ally? Maybe, but nonetheless, Leong accepts.
Hoon, I really thought that these scenes in the deportation camp were so riveting. First, just to be outside of Chinatown, but also to see Yong Chen in this place where he had lost all of his power, and the Chinatown residents wanting to communicate that they were not happy with how he was leading things in Chinatown. And what really struck me in the episode is the moment when Yong Chen realizes he's going to be deported, and he's trying to convince the guards that he's American. He was born in San Francisco. And this is one of the few times throughout the entire series where you just see this look of terror on Yong Jun's face. We don't see this very often in Warrior.
That's right. And Yong Chen himself has expressed the idea that he doesn't belong anywhere, that he's not American enough for America, he's not Chinese enough for China. And this is the sort of manifestation of that problem, and the way that being outside your seat of power can suddenly strip you of all of your agency. This is a theme that we'll see again and again in the series. His Chinese identity makes him an outsider, except for in Chinatown. That's the only place where Yong Chen can really feel at home.
Well, I'm excited to talk to Jason about this because I know that at different times in his own life, he's felt like an outsider. But I also want to share a little bit of a really great conversation I had with Professor Yong Chen, who is an expert on Chinese American history, especially in San Francisco during the period when Warrior takes place. Yong Chen is a professor of history and Asian American studies at UC Irvine, and he's the author of Chinese San Francisco from 1850 to 1943, a Trans-Pacific Community, and Chop Suey USA, the rise of Chinese food in America. So we have a little history lesson here.
San Francisco, the city, was one of the three gold rush cities. It rose to prominence very quickly right after the gold rush. There was a tremendous population growth, populated by people coming from different parts of the country and of the world. Okay, and San Francisco itself was not the destination. It was the gold country, the mining district. When they come from another country, they need a port of entry, right? Where to stay. And they also need a community to function as an information center. So San Francisco emerged in that sense as a very important part of the infrastructure, that provided equipment, provided food, labor supply, technology, information, and also a place for relaxation. For the Chinese, it was a very important hub in this transnational, trans-Pacific chain migration. It's a journey, right? You first travel to a port city, Canton for the most part, and then from there, you sail, sometimes through Japan to San Francisco. And then when you got to San Francisco, you talk to your fellow countrymen. You talk to the association formed by your fellow countrymen. And then they would find your job, send you over there to the mines. So that's how the community, Chinatown, emerged. San Francisco is a very important part of the infrastructure that supported Chinese American communities throughout the West. The towns actually are fairly complicated organization, especially during this time period. So this is contrary to the popular perception of the towns as purely criminal organizations, right? During this time, the Chinese American community remained a predominantly bachelor society for a long time. This is because of the nature of migration in general to California, but this also has to do with the anti-Chinese immigration laws, right? The Page Act of 1875, for example, prevented Chinese women from coming to the U.S., right? So when families started to emerge in other ethnic communities, Chinese America remained predominantly bachelor society. So we have a lot of bachelors here, young men, in their 20s, in their early 30s, right? And so this is a sort of a fraternity kind of organization among them. It provided a lot of social service, mutual aid, support to each other. Okay. But then at the same time, towards the end of the 19th century, some of the towns also became very violent. They're engaged in prostitution, in other kinds of illegal activities. So it became quite notorious.
It was so interesting to hear what Professor Chen said about how the Page Act really kept Chinese women from immigrating to the U.S. and how Chinatown at this time really was a bachelor society, and that the Tongs were a way of building community. I would even consider that a form of building family in a place where there were no families. And then this may seem obvious, but if you think about it, just the fact that Father June has a son born in San Francisco, and yet he still feels so conflicted about where he belongs, even though he was born in the U.S. Their family's existence was really a rare thing at that time.
Yeah, the Page Act was really an attempt to literally breed the Chinese out of the country. But yeah, Father June and Young June, they have this central father-son relationship, but it doesn't have any solid model for it. It feels wobbly. They're from different generations, but they're also from different cultures, and they're making it up as they go, which is, the immigration story for so many people throughout American history. So that's really something that we're going to dive into in our conversation with Perry and Jason.
Well, Hoon, I want to know a little bit more about your warrior cast family.
They're the worst. Sorry.
The worst.
Perry and Jason, aside from being incredible actors, they just became people that I truly love and admire. And they are radically different from their characters in real life. Perry is such an open, generous, nurturing, forgiving person, as opposed to the sort of hard-hearted and, the hard-fisted in many ways Father June. And then Young June, obviously Jason's not a psychopath. I'm just kidding. Young June's not a psychopath.
Not as much of a psychopath?
No, he's a very considered, intelligent actor. He's somebody that's really digging artistically as well. To see him play such a freewheeling character that seems to have no boundaries and seems to have no regard even for his own safety, it's really a testament to what he brings to the table.
I mean, Young June, I think, is just one of the great characters in television today, perhaps television history, and Jason just brings him alive, and you experience so many emotions with him. I mean, he's hysterical, he's brooding, he's bratty, he's vicious. But throughout this season, we're going to see his heart a little bit more than I think we've seen in the past. And I am so excited to meet the guys behind this father-son duo. So we are so happy to welcome Perry Young and Jason Tobin to the podcast today. Perry plays the venerable Father June, and Jason plays the, shall we say, considerably less venerable Young June.
Yeah. And Perry is, sort of a fixture in the Asian American creative scene. I actually knew about him through my wife, Sekia, who knew him when he was part of the Asian American performance collective Slant. I think they're actually still active. He's also a member of La Mama Theater's Great Jones Repertory Company of New York City, which is just one of the great theater repertory companies. He's had notable roles in Condemned, The Jade Pendant, John Wick Chapter 2, and Boogie, directed by Eddie Huang, and of course, Steven Soderbergh's The Knick, which made him Cinemax mates for me. What we were able to showcase, I believe, in season 1 is he's also, an award-winning Japanese shakuhachi flute craftsman and performer. He leads meditation flute making and playing workshops in Zen temples and theater workshops across the United States. He's just a multifaceted, phenomenal guy. Such a great match for the talents of Jason as well.
Yeah, I know Perry as this relentless activist speaking out against racism, bigotry, and all the Asian hate that's become so pervasive over the last couple of years. He is such an incredible human being. And Jason Tobin is also an outstanding human. He is an award-winning Hong Kong British film and television actor who has appeared in over 20 films and television productions. His breakout film was the great Better Luck Tomorrow by Justin Lin, which in 2019, the Los Angeles Times named the best Asian American film of the last 20 years. A New York Magazine critic commended Jason's performance in particular and said it is an unbridled portrayal of a hyper, horny, and confused brat, which I guess could apply to his warrior portrayal as well.
He's cornering the market on hyper and horny and confused.
Perry Young and Jason Tobin, a.k.a. Father June and Young June. Let's get sticky, everybody.
Hello, Lisa.
How's it going, everyone?
You guys look familiar.
Perry, I'll start with you because you grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and you have firsthand knowledge of Tong violence and you know what the Tongs were like in the city. And I wonder if that impacted your performance in any way throughout these 3 seasons of Warrior.
Most definitely. I was born in Oakland, California, which is like the Brooklyn to the Manhattan, so Oakland has its own great Chinatown and it has its own Tongs. But let me clarify first is that Tongs just means benevolent association. So there are many benevolent associations for each clan, each, surname. And not all of them, partook in nefarious activities like the Hopway or the Longzi, but some did. But yes, in the 70s, I did see a lot of gang violence coming up. And the big one was the Golden Dragon shooting by the Wachings. And the Wachings were sort of the younger gangs of the Hop Sing Tong at the time. So Hop Sing is what the Hopway Tong is based on. And, my cousins lived in San Francisco who were, we call them FOBs, right? Fresh off the boat. They went to school with Wachings and eventually they just had to escape because they were, forced to join or pay, like protection money. And one day they were just in Oakland's Chinatown and it was like overnight they had to move to get out. And it was at that time that the Golden Dragon shooting happened and a lot of this sort of gang warfare. And, the 70s, this was before the model minority myth, and Chinatowns were pretty impoverished places where there were a lot of young people with no jobs. So you can see how, if you're in a community with no jobs and there's no, how do you get out of there? And, I was an at-risk youth growing up, and my brothers, luckily I was the youngest of 3 brothers and my older brothers watched out for me and kept me a little, safer from some of the activities that I could have been involved with that would have brought me just one step closer to being, in a situation where I would have been associated with a gang. So it's because of that situation that I think, my dad's passed away now, but he uprooted us and moved to Texas and he bought the quintessential Chinese restaurant in the middle of nowhere to raise his family. And, so I had part of my young teenage years growing up in Texas.
Wow. And just to dig into that a little bit, this show takes place in the 1800s. And you were just referring to the Tongs or the gangs in the 60s and 70s. How did those more violent Tongs, the gangs, how did they evolve over the decades?
I could only speak from empirical experience, but my earliest memories of the Tongs were like my father was in a Tong and everybody was in a Tong. So it's whether you were in, a regular Tong or one that, was like a mafia. So my father was in a regular Tong and they took care of him. When he passed away, they arranged his funerals and everything, which is, what they do for immigrants that come with no family. My father came with a family, but they still took care of us. And I remember these memories probably go back to when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, playing in San Francisco's Chinatown in a Tong association with a lot of sort of martial arts gear around, like swords and things like that. So they probably taught martial arts there or something. But my father played MJ there, Mahjong, on weekends. And I just remember hanging out and looking at all these incense burners and the pictures of all these older members that had passed away. And, you could just sort of smell all those years in this old dark wood, in the second floor of this Chinese building on Grant Street in San Francisco. And these Tongs were they would have these dragon dances, New Year's, they would, have all these autumn festivals. And also at Christmas, there'd be a Chinese Santa Claus. So this was the normal Tong. Now, the other Tongs were the ones that evolved because they had to protect the community. They had to find ways to fight violence. If you hear, Lisa, you probably know about the history of Chinese miners being massacred for their claims. one of the biggest lynchings in America in Los Angeles with something like 18 Chinese men and a boy lynched. Chinatown's
LA,
burned
Chinatown,
down.
yeah.
Exactly. Seattle, where the Chinese were uprooted and forced on a train out of town. And so these Tongs had to fight that. And right from the beginning, it was like, hey, Father Jun has a speech in episode 1, season 1, of why he started the Hop Way, and it's to prevent the violence of the ducks. And that is what set up like my character. He's here for his people to prevent the violence, from the ducks. And that's how most of the Tongs happened. It's like, if we don't do this, we are a clan of brotherhood. Who else is going to protect our people? And some of these Tongs, became rivals when they realized that it's actually quite powerful. There's some benefits to have that power.
People in this world of the show, they frequently compare Yong Jun to Father Jun, and not particularly favorably. So what did Father Jun do to earn the respect that Yong Jun does not have quite yet?
I'd like to hear Yong Jun tell me the story.
Tell me why I'm successful, son.
What is that shadow that you are living in, Yong Jun? Talk about that.
I think that shadow is ever present, ever looming over Yong Jun. Yong Jun has this feeling of frustration with the way Father Jun has been running the show, so to speak. And he is so well respected, that it's just that you're never going to get out of the shadow. You're always going to be the son of Father Jun, the original. and it doesn't help that Yong Jun is, tempestuous and can easily fly off the handle and can sometimes get ourselves into more trouble. So yeah, I would say that Father Jun just has this long legacy that Yong Jun hasn't been given the opportunity to prove himself yet.
So Father Jun is a community-oriented person. And from the get-go, when he says we have to stop the violence of the ducks, that's why I started this Tong. And later on, when he berates Yong Jun for having this, taking down this rebel Tong but he lost some people. It's like, is it worth losing your brothers over this, So I think that the community values Father Jun because he looks out for his people. And I think Yong Jun is a little bit more like, I need to get what I need right now.
We often hear about relationships between Asian fathers and sons as being quite fraught.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So would you say that Father Jun and Yong Jun have a typical Chinese relationship between father and son?
I would say yes. The quick answer is yes. But then I think this is what's interesting about this relationship is that Yong Jun was born in America. That he is of a different generation and a different kind of thinking, at least for that time period. And so there's a restlessness, a rebelliousness that he feels frustrated that he's part of this Chinese culture, yet he's American, but he can't express those parts of himself through the Tong and through the way they do business. And so I think that chip on the shoulder just feeds the fuel of his anger, of his in those moments when he is, for lack of a better word, sociopathic. And
lack of a better word?
That's a pretty good word for
It's a pretty good word. It might be a bit strong, but
Yeah, it's a little strong.
It is a very typical relationship in terms of it's very Confucianist, like Father Jun comes from China. He's bringing that culture in, and you see it all over the show. Is like, bowing to the ancestors, to the hierarchy. And, in very traditional Chinese cultures, and I think other Asian cultures, it's like you have to listen to your parents. They're absolutely 100% right all the time. And you just have to go with the flow. So when Father Jun has this, bratty American-born ABC kid who has his own mind, he's just like, why don't you get with the program? Like you're not learning the ropes of the Tong. You're not listening. You're not watching me. I'm not supposed to be teaching you. You're supposed to be watching me and learning, So there's a lot of like, he's failing me is a typical in Confucianism, sort of the thought is he is failing our relationship.
And that's That's partially the tension of a child that's born in a new context, right? Like from any immigrant story or any generational story.
Yeah, it is so interesting to think about the cultural difference
That's
there.
right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I want to ask Jason something because this is, you're playing a character in a story that is an Asian American story. And you have a background that spans across Hong Kong, across America, because you lived here for a while.
Yeah.
London and England, et cetera. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit and how you mine your own process for that.
Well, I think you kind of encapsulated it there, which is that this story is universal, right? Like the diaspora of all these immigrant groups, whether it's the Chinese diaspora, for example, like they're all over the world, and the story is so familiar. Whether you're a Chinese born and raised in Australia and you have immigrant parents, or whether it's the UK or Canada or America. And in my own personal experience, it's like, and actually Yong Chen says this in episode 5 of season 1, and that is that I'm not Chinese enough in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
I'm not English enough when I'm in England.
Yeah.
I'm not American enough when I'm in America, and so. In many ways, I've spent my whole life preparing for this role in that regard,
Yeah.
This is another line in episode 5. I think you say, do you say, I'm a Chinaman that's never been to China?
Yeah. I'm a Chinaman that's never been to China.
That's a great line.
And I was born in America, but I'm no American.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, there was no acting there. And that's just me expressing myself. And so I think that is definitely a source of a lot of the frustration, for Yong Chen, because, Yong Chen understands the politics and the boundaries in San Francisco. He understands his father, I believe. He just doesn't agree.
Right.
You know, it's not that he doesn't understand. It's just like, no, but I understand you. I just don't think you're correct.
I mean, Jason, you're just so great in this character. And I just,
Thank you.
have to just ask you how much fun it is to play this character. That is just like, he's so bratty and unhinged.
Oh my God. Let me tell you something, Lisa. This is, look, it's a great show, great characters. There's lots of great shows, great movies, but I have to tell you, I have the best damn role on TV right now. Yong Chen, I mean, I can't think of any other role that gives me so much joy and pleasure. I literally get to do everything. Earlier I described, Yong Chen as sociopathic, but that's just one sliver of his personality in the moments that he's like that. He's also a very loving, caring person. He's a he's a loyal brother.
Which we'll see in season 3.
He is like he's funny. He's brave. Someone asked me, what is the one thing that you love about playing Yong Chen? And I would say that just how brave he is, how courageous he is. Like he's just like he will not say no to a fight. You know what I mean? He's just like, yup, I'm there. I'm with you, brother. I'll go down with you. And whether that's for his Hopway brothers, whether that's for Assam, whether that's for his father, or whether that's for Chinese people in Chinatown. Yeah, so going back to what you said, Lisa, this is the most incredible fun I've ever had in a role.
Jason, I read that you initially auditioned for the role of Assam.
Yes, that's right.
But that character just didn't feel right.
Yeah, so Lisa, this is one of the things that happens, and I'm sure Hoon and Perry will corroborate. That is, sometimes in the business, if a role's Asian, they just throw every Asian at it. You know what I mean? Like
who's in my Asian folder?
Oh, it doesn't matter whether you're archetypally right for it or if they're like, oh, we're thinking out of the box. No, it's just like, oh, they're Asian. Okay, so let's all read, for that role. So there might have been a little bit of that going on. I think maybe had I been in a different time of my life, maybe I would have, done a half decent job as Assam. But I remember reading for it and just thinking, you know what? I think they might think I'm a decent enough actor, but I don't think I'm right for this. I wouldn't cast myself in this role. And I just kind of left it at that. And then a few months later, I get a call from Justin Lin and Alexa Fogel and Jonathan Sharper asking me to read for Youngjun. And then, long story short, I was on an airplane to Cape Town like 2 weeks later, and it's just been a pleasure ever since.
Jason, you said something about the show, and I'd love all of you to comment on this because I think it's just a really interesting idea. You said in an interview that the whole cast is trying to right a wrong.
Yeah.
That's sort of the intention of this show.
Yes.
What did you mean by that? And I'd love Perry and Hoon to also comment on that as well.
Sure. In that specific moment, I was referring to Bruce Lee and how he wanted to make this show 50 years ago, and the studios didn't think that an Asian or Chinese man could lead a TV show, especially being a martial artist and playing a Chinese person. Alluding to kung fu and stuff, and so in many ways, like, to be able to make this show 50 years later, we were righting that wrong. But I feel like now, when I look back on it, I feel like we are actually speaking about something even more broader than just Bruce Lee not playing that role in kung fu or not being able to play Assam and Warrior in 50 years ago. It's really speaking about representation. And all the actors that came before and after, and of all Asian people, or any group that hasn't been represented on film and TV, I feel like that's the wrong that we're righting. I mean, you see this cast, right? And they look so great on TV. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like, we're not asking for a favor, like, we belong here. And so, to me, it went from this sort of specific, Bruce Lee didn't get to play, this role, to actually this speaks about all of us.
Perry, could you comment on that idea of righting a wrong with the show Warrior?
Yes, I mean, exactly what Jason said about the show being taken away from him. Maybe the idea was taken from him and then given to a person who, we don't even know what race he was, but he pretended to be, Asian.
We're talking about kung fu. Kung fu. Yeah.
And then, it's how we seize the moment. And like Jason says, it's much bigger than that. And, in the pandemic, when people had to stay home and start to binge on the show, I got so many DMs and responses saying, thank God, and they would have never found the show.
I know 100 were from me.
L. Ling, Lisa L.
And so many people actually asked me if I can get the cast to make PSAs, public service announcements about this violence, And, I said, I can't, get people to do that, but it's a call for me to right this wrong at this moment. And I'd always been an activist through my art, but I felt like this is a moment to actually, step up to the podium and speak about it. So I think it's made Asian Americans, it's given Asian Americans some sort of empowerment. The show Warrior has given us, and I think it's given, Bruce Lee, not that it needed the show to be bigger than ever, but I think Bruce Lee is bigger than ever. And much of that is, thanks to Shannon's work in shepherding his father's legacy. But I think that this show really became something that galvanized a lot of Asians, and not just Asians, but, there's people across the board who love the show, and so many women love the show. And so I think it's about
Asian men are hot.
I mean, it's just everybody's beautiful in the show. And I don't mean just visually beautiful. We have charisma that reaches beyond like visual beauty. It's like we want to tell the story, and we want to tell it in a way that is meaningful to us. And that is so, I think, empowering for me, and I think it just reaches beyond the television screen.
And just to expand on that, because Hoon, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that idea of righting a wrong, but how does the fact that this show is grounded in a very distinctive part of American history play into that as well?
Well, actually, my response is grounded in the thing you're bringing up here. And I know Jason was speaking about the Bruce Lee story when he made that comment, but I readily agree. I think it's a more expansive idea than that. Mm-hmm. I would say that the wrong for me is, first and foremost, unemployment. That should always be righted. Anytime I'm unemployed, that's wrong. Come on. But I think that the idea that there's often these problems that occur through omission. And by telling a story, you're pointing out that, hey, there is not a single narrative that is the truth, the only truth. There are a million stories out there and, just as many lenses to that story. So the grounding it in the reality of a world means that you're saying the lived experience of the people from that time is a valid position to explore. And it's a valid position to use as a foundation for a more heightened fantastical narrative. That's for entertainment, that's for partially for education, but mostly for dramatic interest and the same cathartic processes that any great storytelling brings to bear. So I feel like for me, it's the idea of saying, just as there is a story that we all grow up with, that's not accurate. That's not enough, and it's insufficient. And our part of it is what we have to bring to bear.
Well, what is it like as actors and as Asian men? What has Bruce Lee's career meant to you? And what has it been like to work on a show that was inspired by, that is the brainchild of Bruce Lee?
Wow. Wow. I grew up a huge Bruce Lee fan. I think when I was younger, I needed a Asian male role model, and Bruce Lee, ticked all the boxes. And my dad actually introduced me to him, and also, coming from Hong Kong, I had that thinking wow, this guy from Hong Kong went all the way to Hollywood and accomplished all these things. And so when I was 18, I packed my bag and went to LA, trying to follow this path. And, years and years later, after I'd been in the business for 10 years, I was going through this existential crisis where I felt like, my dreams of becoming an actor were in many ways kind of imprisoning me. And when I first went to America, I had this idea that I'd love to go drive up to Bruce Lee's grave in Seattle. So at this 10-year mark, I was feeling very frustrated in my career, and I made this road trip, and I drove all the way up. I was actually in San Diego at the time, drove from San Diego to Seattle, and then I went to Bruce Lee's grave. And I was taken by surprise because when I got there, I didn't realize how emotional I would be, And I came unprepared because once I got there, I saw that lots of fans had left messages and notes and letters and flowers and toys and things, and I hadn't even thought that far, I didn't think, for me, it was just a thing to do, but I was overcome with emotion, and I took out a map that I used to get there, a road map, and I wrote a little message to him, and I thanked Bruce for helping me get through my childhood. He represented bravery, courage, self-expression and self-realization. And I joked many years later when I got Warrior, I told Shannon this story because I said to her, what's crazy is I thanked your dad for getting me through my childhood then, and now I got to thank him for getting me through my adulthood. It's this job has literally, helped me so much because, when I got Warrior, I was working 10, 12 different side hustles to make ends meet. I have 3 children, and it was tough times. And then here again, Bruce coming to the rescue, giving me this great role, this great show. And now, I can honestly say that, from the bottom of my heart that I've achieved all my goals. I've achieved my dreams. I'm a working actor on a great show, playing a great role. And, and I have a beautiful family. I'm like, wow. Wow. So yeah, through childhood and adulthood.
That's beautiful, Jason. Perry, how about you? As an Asian man, what has Bruce Lee's career and legacy meant to you?
Well, I was born in Oakland, right down the street from where Bruce's Kung Fu studio was in downtown Oakland on MacArthur and Broadway. And I was having lunch with Shannon one day, and in LA, and I went, "Oh my God, I'm here. I'm having lunch with Shannon." And I asked, where was Brandon born? Because I heard Brandon was born in Oakland, and she goes, "Oh, hold on," and she goes, "Mom, where's Brandon born?" And she says, East Oakland Hospital, and I went, "Wait, because he could have been born in the same hospital I was born in, And this is all just to say that Bruce was our hometown hero. He was the kid that made it out of the Bay Area. And, like he had a Kung Fu studio there, the legendary fight between him and Wong Jackman Wong. Like I was, 6 years old taking Kung Fu classes with Jackman Wong. And I heard about the fight with Bruce Lee, and I don't know what happened. I don't want to get into stuff, but like, I was around that time, and like everybody was always like, Bruce Lee he's us. We are Bruce, and so his success meant that we had a chance at it. From Oakland, California, had a chance to do what he did, but it was so far fetched, like just watching him on the screen, there was nothing like Bruce Lee speaking to me on the screen like him, and it was just so far beyond what I could ever fathom that I would do. And, I didn't do that. I did art and music and eventually found my way into like, experimental theater, dance, and then onto off-Broadway and then onto film and television. But it took, 30 years or 40 years to eventually get there. And one day there's an audition, that on Deadline, this is Bruce Lee's story coming to life with Justin Lin. And this was like 2016 or something or 15. And I went, oh my God, I called my manager. Says, when they're auditioning roles for that, get me anything. I'll do anything, And lo and behold, 2017, they were having auditions and my manager said, they want to see you for this role. And I looked at the sides and it said, Father June, 70s, milky eye. And I went, well, I'm not 70, but, but they want to see me for the role. And, I went in, like that morning, I thought, I'm going to meditate. I'm going to do everything. I learned all those monologues. I'm going to go in, I'm going to be chill. And then my partner says, oh, aren't you going to our son's high school orientation this morning? I went, oh my God, now I got to go to get my son through his orientation. And then I got to go to the audition.
And you're like, no.
And, absolutely. And I went to the orientation. It went late. I threw him in a cab afterwards. I went in a cab downtown. He went uptown. I got into the audition, Alexa Fogel's audition office. And I was like 5 minutes early. I was, oh my God, I made it 5 minutes. And the assistant goes, oh, you're here. Are you ready? Let's just go. And I went, oh my God, I can't even take a breath, And she says, action. And, I say the lines and she kind of cuts me off midway and she goes, stop what you're doing. They want to see someone really solid. And I went, oh my God, I wasn't even doing anything, And she goes, you ready to try again? And this was my Bruce Lee moment. So I said, okay, yeah. I turned around. Just give me a minute. I turned around, took a deep breath, and I went, be like water. And I turned around and I did the monologue. And she went, oh, good. Let's do the other one. And I did the other one. She goes, great, thanks, And that's... that's all you hear, right? Great. That was great. Thanks. And, but, so 3 days later, my manager calls and says they offered me the role. And I just, wow. I screamed because it was like, this was, I wasn't going to get it, but I was just going to do my thing and let it flow. Because it's all about that. Just let it flow. But Bruce, like Jason said, he got me through my childhood. It was rough in Oakland, but, when Bruce Lee movies came out, I saw the culture change. I saw us going from being picked on to being like sort of little rock stars, We'd go into the theaters and you'd see black and brown people wearing Kung Fu outfits, high-fiving us as we walked down the line because Return of the Dragon and Enter Dragon were like double, what do you got, a double build, and it was like all summer long, and it was just huge. And we went from being, again, these kids that were being picked on to being like cool. And so like that's the power of representation. Bruce gave us all something. And, he put black people in his movies and black people saw that. It was just utterly like, wow, culture is changing. And I guess I'm lucky in hindsight.
Just so ahead of his time.
You know, so ahead of his time, or what sometimes people say, he's in his time and we're behind, you know? I just, in hindsight, think that I was lucky to have seen culture change and the power of representation. And Bruce is, you know, he's always an inspiration.
Jason, I just, before we go, I have to ask you about fighting.
Yes.
Because your fighting style just seems so unique to your character. In what way is that style that you and the coordinators have concocted an extension of Yong Chen?
You know, that's a great question. Thank you. Well, you know, this is what's so great about filmmaking, right? It's you bring in all these different artists and art forms together to create this, you know, bigger thing. And so obviously, you know, we have the writing team, we have JT and all that, but then every other person, every other department also takes part in that writing, so to speak. So, for example, you know, I got the first script, the pilot, and you know, I'm on my way to Cape Town to shoot it, and there's no mention in the script what Yong Chen looks like, you know, like or how he fights or anything about his knives. So I get to Cape Town, and I'm obviously thrilled already about the role. And then I go to the costume designer, and she says, "Oh, you know, we're thinking about this, and Hop Way is going to wear these suits." And I'm like, "Oh God, that's fantastic!" And like, you know, and then you know, I go to the hair department and hair and makeup, and they're like, "Well, you know, we had this idea for a pompadour for a son, but then we spoke to the producers, and they think that's more right for Yong Chen, and why don't we give it a go?" They put the pompadour on me, and I'm like, oh, yes. You know, like you know, it gets written, you know, as we go along. And then I go into the stunt tent, and I meet Brett Chan, our stunt coordinator, and the stunt team, and then Haiyang, who's my stunt double, and who does all the previs of the fights as well. And Brett says, you know, I got this idea that Yong Chen fights with two knives. And I'm like, oh, God, this just keeps getting better and better. I'm like, yes, two knives. And then and then he shows me the previs for Yong Jun's first fight, which is in episode 2 of season 1. And you know, the camera is like tracks behind Yong Chen as he pulls his two knives out. And it's all done by Haiyang, my stunt double. And Haiyang's a fantastic, unbelievable martial artist from China, a wushu practitioner. And so he's my coach, right? He trains me to do the choreography. But like a script, like text, for example, you know, he does it. I may still throw the punch, this kick, this stab, you know, as choreographed. But he does it differently than I do. He has a very wushu way about him, in the way, you know, he moves his body and stuff. But then I get to express myself in it, in those moves. You know, I get to bring my own flavor. You know, you're the actor, you bring yourself to the role, and therefore also even in the choreography, you bring your own style to it. And so it's 100% choreographed by Brett and his team. But then I get to, you know, express myself in it. And what I like to bring to it, again, going back to that Yong Chen is, you know, he's American, right? He's Chinese, but he's American. And for me, the difference between how Haiyang and I play is that Haiyang is a traditional martial artist. He's an unbelievable traditional martial artist. He has a beautiful wushu style. And me, I bring a more modern boxing, MMA, kind of more of an American, kind of more dirty street kind of brutality to it, and less beautiful, so to speak.
It's called drunken sociopath.
It's drunken sociopath, exactly. But I am 1% of the martial artist that Haiyang is. You know? It's just to be clear.
So one of the things we're asking all of our guests is, you know, to kind of make the connection back to the source and the origin of our whole story, which is Bruce Lee, and to ask them the question of what is your relationship with the phrase or the idea of be like water. And now, Perry, you've explained this moment so beautifully. So I maybe want to ask Jason if he has something to share around that philosophy.
what jumps to mind in this moment, and obviously it's a phrase that has played a role in many aspects of my life, but I would say, specifically right now, what jumps to mind is in acting, right? Which is when I wanted to become an actor, I moved to LA to become an actor, and I wanted to learn and be, I wanted to be a great actor. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I started to, learn the craft and, get some experience, and eventually, like, sometimes we can overthink it, right? And then eventually I feel like that overthinking and coupled with the rejection in the business, it, in some ways, like at one part of my life, I felt like I had actor's block. You hear this phrase, writer's block, but I had, at one point in my career, I literally had actor's block where I couldn't even read a script without stumbling over my lines. I was having some kind of like reaction, and eventually the way I got over it was I had to let it all go, not think about it, live in the moment, be like water. Just, I don't have to overthink these things. I'm already a human being, a living, breathing human being. I already just bring a lot to it just by being alive and saying the lines and just enjoying it in the moment. And ultimately, be like water, it means, like, for me, not being in my head. The last place I want to be when I'm performing is in my head, And so that to me is I feel like that's where my thoughts and feelings are regarding Be Water. And if you'd asked me this question, at different times in my life, it would mean different things to me. But at the moment, I feel like that's where it resides for me.
Well, Perry and Jason, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and just such a great pleasure to watch you on Warrior. Thank you so much.
Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much. Thank you, Hoon. Thank you.
Absolute
so good
pleasure.
Seeing you guys.
Thank you, Hoon.
Okay, that's it for us. Until next time.
Yes, we'd like to thank Perry Yong and Jason Tobin for joining us today.
Join us next time when we talk to a previous guest on the podcast, series stunt and fight coordinator and all-around super guy, Brett Chan. We're going to talk with Brett about his other job. He took over the directorship of episode 6. We're back with a new podcast after every new episode of Warrior, so come back for more as soon as you've watched episode 6.
Yes, stream new episodes of Warrior Thursdays only on Max, and listen to this riveting podcast on Max and wherever you listen to podcasts.
The Official Warrior Podcast is a Max podcast produced by the Mashup Americans. It is executive produced by Amy S. Choi and Rebecca Lehrer. Our producers are Sarah Pellegrini and Thomas Liu. Our development producer is Nicole Kelly. Our production manager is Shelby Sandlin. The show is mixed by Pedro Rafael Rosano.